Well, this Nightmare on Elm Street news just got a little bit better. How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champane, and if you like monsters, slashers, pretty much any movie shot during, set during, or inspired by the 1980s, this is the channel for you. I'll talk about this more at the end of the video, but I just wanted to start out by saying thanks for helping blow up my last video. I definitely wasn't expecting it to hit 100,000 views, but I appreciate each and every single one of you that watched it. And if you're one of the 2,000 people or so who subscribed after watching it, I just want to say thanks, and I hope you enjoy the content here on this channel. All right, so we have a bunch of new updates to talk about with this movie because like an hour after I posted that video, there were a couple articles that went up with even more info, and things have really changed. I'll walk it back and give you a Cliff's Notes version of what's been going on. So with the Nightmare on Elm Street, basically what we've heard over the past few years is that the rights ended up going back to the Wes Craven estate, and they have been very careful about who they want to give it out to the point where no one has really been able to get their hands on the rights, which in my opinion is a good thing. They did a good job giving out the rights for Scream and making sure that that ended up at a good studio. And as much as I am neutral on Scream 5, I really liked it the first time I saw it, and then every subsequent viewing I like it less. I do really love Scream 6, and overall I think they've done a good job because Scream 6 is the highest grossing movie in the entire franchise. There was never any public reasoning as to why they've never really given anyone the rights, but one of the rumors that's been going around for a long time is that they had an extremely high price tag on it and people were just not really biting. So studios were kind of just waiting it out, hoping they would lower the price over time, but they realized it was kind of like a or get off the pot scenario. And then there was a bidding war where all the different companies that want to get their hands on a Nightmare on Elm Street, which I'm assuming is quite a few different studios, were throwing out different pitches and different dollar amounts. And initially, thanks to this leaker called the V-Scooper, who has gotten things right in the past about The Boys and other film franchises, it seemed like the rights ended up going to Blumhouse. Now, depending on how you feel about Blumhouse, I feel like you were totally for this or totally against this. There was no middle ground here where you were like, let's just wait and see what happens here if they do end up getting the rights. And I totally understand that standpoint because while I really enjoy the Halloween trilogy they put out, they also put out a lot of messy movies and a lot of rushed movies. And for every great movie they put out, like The Black Phone or Freaky or Happy Death Day or Halloween 2018, there are other ones that they either rush out into theaters or just throw up on Amazon Prime or on Peacock or something like that. So depending on how much effort or budget gets put into a Blumhouse movie, it can drastically shift the quality of that final product. And with a franchise like a Nightmare on Elm Street, which not only has a ton of fans, but is loved as much, if not more than Halloween, I understand why there was a group of people who weren't happy to hear about Blumhouse being attached to it potentially, just because you want this movie to be perfect. It's been a very long time since we got a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. The last time we saw Freddy on screen, other than his appearance in The Goldbergs, was the remake, which is just god awful. I rarely, if ever, just slam on a movie on this channel, but I just really don't ever want to see the day when film Twitter starts revisiting the remake of a Nightmare on Elm Street, because if there was a situation where you could get everything wrong about a remake, I think that one was it. Except for casting Jackie Earl Haley as Freddy, I think he did a really good job kind of being the successor to Robert Englund, and if he wasn't done so dirty by cheap writing and terrible CGI effects that were applied to the makeup look that actually looked pretty decent, I feel like he could have carried the franchise a little bit further than just one remake, but you know, that's spilled milk. There's really nothing they can do about that now. So keeping that in mind, if they are going to make a new Nightmare on Elm Street movie, you want everything to be perfect, right? You want the studio behind it to be perfect. You want the filmmakers to be perfect. You want to give it as much chance as possible to be a huge hit like Halloween 2018 was back when that came out. And I'm just going to be real. We're not even a year out from Halloween Ends, and as much as I like that movie, I have seen so many people on Twitter say good things about it and just get dogpiled, and I think there are quite a few people on Twitter who really don't like that movie. So you can kind of see why I thought initially the group of people who were against Blumhouse taking on a Nightmare on Elm Street would be much bigger than the people for it, but I was just personally shocked to see that it was pretty much 50-50 in my comments, and for the most part people were just happy to see a new movie coming out in that franchise. That's kind of where I sat. I want a good movie, but at the end of the day, bringing back slasher icons is great, and while we do have Art the Clown, and Art the Clown is kind of like like this new version of Freddy, Jason, and Michael Myers. I don't think he's really at the same level, just because, you know, the Terrifier movies are indie movies at the end of the day. They did get picked up by the parent company of Bloody Disgusting, and they were put in theaters, and it was awesome to see it make like 600 times its budget or something like that last year. But it's going to take a little bit more time and a much bigger release to kind of solidify Art the Clown as, like, I don't know, a modern slasher icon at the same level as Michael, Jason, and Freddy. I feel like that's a totally fair statement to make. So outside of Art the Clown, there aren't really a ton of movies coming out that are trying to solidify slasher icons. I feel like a lot of studios learned the wrong lesson from Halloween 2018, where instead of saying, oh, slashers are big, we can have a gory R-rated slasher movie and put it into theaters, and it could make over $200 million. The lesson that they learned from it is that they should go back into their IP catalog and find a movie from like 40 years ago where the main actress or actor is still alive, and then bring them back to deliver exposition like it's happening again, or to tell the new cast exactly how to beat the villain. And I am fine with that kind of routine. I'm still working on another video about The Exorcist, but my preferred outcome would have been more original slasher movies trying to make a new Michael, a new Freddy, or a new Jason. But until that happens, I'm just happy to see more movies in these franchises, and I have heard word that there is something going on behind the scenes with a new Friday the 13th movie, so things are getting better on that front. Anyway, I talked to a bunch of my contacts on Twitter. I mean, that sounds so much more official than it is. I just DM people I know. Like, I talked to Critical Overlord, I talked to John Squires over at Bloody Disgusting, I talked to Big Screen Leaks, and basically what I was able to determine is that we all pretty much had the same info and that it all came from different people, which was cool to me because it basically told me that it might be right. There's a great write-up about this over on Big Screen Leaks, but I'm just going to go through it all here. So the new update here is that there was a bidding war for Nightmare on Elm Street's rights back in May or June, and someone did acquire those rights, but it was not Blumhouse, and from everything I've heard, the rights have actually reverted back to New Line Cinema. And if you ask me what studios I would like the rights for A Nightmare on Elm Street to end up at, the only two I'd really personally like to see it at are New Line Cinema and Paramount. So overall, my number one pick was New Line Cinema. I just like the movies they make. I think they do a good job with horror. I love the Conjuring franchise, except for The Curse of La Llorona and The Nun. And I also thought Evil Dead Rise was overall pretty good. There was a lot of nitpicks from me as a massive Evil Dead fan, but you know, they have a different flavor than what we're seeing from Spyglass with Scream 5 and 6. And they definitely have a different look and feel than what we've seen from Universal over the past few years, which is basically a formula like either do a requel or give something an extremely low budget, shoot it in less than a year, edit it super fast, throw out a few trailers, copyright claim everyone on YouTube who uses any frame of footage from any movie or trailer you put out, and then make a ton of money on your less than $10 million budget movie. So yeah, taking all three of those options there, I really think New Line is the best. In my last video, I was talking about how after I saw It Chapter 2 and realized that movie is just essentially set up like a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, I was kind of thinking that maybe Andy Muschietti was gunning for that role, and I was kind of 50-50 on it, and I'm even less than that now, so I would say I'm like 30-70, leaning towards the negative on wanting him to direct it. I have nothing against the guy. I like the stories in all of his horror movies, whether you're talking about both It movies or Mama. I just don't like the way he uses CGI. I think the way he uses it is stylized, and there is a time and place for that, but the genre where I don't want to see stylized CGI, or really CGI that I notice at all, is horror, and he seems to just completely ignore everyone who complains about the CGI. And I feel like the tipping point for that was The Flash, but I'm just expecting when the Batman Brave and the Bold trailer comes out to see a whole bunch of CGI like that bridge scene in The Flash. You know, I have seen all of his movies and every single one of them has way too much noticeable CGI for me. So I'm still feeling like I don't really want this franchise to end up with him, but you know, he is busy with Batman the Brave and the Bold, so I don't think it will. Of course, I would love to see this go to James Wan and Leigh Whannell. I think they would do an incredible job, and James Wan is kind of a golden boy over at DC, right? Like, he has the highest grossing DCEU movie with Aquaman. That movie made so much more money than I thought it would. He's done a little bit of horror since then with Malignant, but I'd really like to see him come back and take on a huge franchise again with A Nightmare on Elm Street, and Leigh Whannell would be a great writer to attach to that. I know Leigh Whannell is over at Universal working on stuff like, I think, the Escape from New York remake and whatever he wants to do after The Invisible Man, but that dude can really do no wrong in my eyes after The Invisible Man and everything else he's worked on. I mentioned Racka Racka in the last video, but there they're working on the sequel to talk to me, so I'm not sure if they'd really be available. Mike Flanagan is the name that came up so many times in the comments, and I just need to be shown why he's a great pick, because I personally love Mike Flanagan stuff. I think Midnight Mass is one of the greatest pieces of vampire media ever created, like bar none. I absolutely loved Oculus. I really like The Haunting of Hill House, and Dr. Sleep was in my top 3 movies the year it came out. But my big caveat with his stuff is that there's just not a lot of gore in it. There's not a lot of blood. There's not a lot of real killing outside of Gerald's Game, which I also thought was pretty okay. I like the degloving scene, but he does that a lot in his movies, and I don't know, I just need to see more gore and like slasher killing in his movies, because Hush I think is okay, right? Like that movie, when it came out on Netflix, everyone was kind of losing their minds over it, and I thought it was solid, right? Like I think it's good, but my favorite preferred genre of horror movie is a slasher movie. I just didn't see a lot of what I look for in that movie. So yeah, I know he wants to do Halloween, I know he wants to do A Nightmare on Elm Street, and personally I would love to be proven wrong. I just like don't connect him to A Nightmare on Elm Street in my mind. As for who would play Freddy, I saw a bunch of comments mentioning my friend Dave McCrae. I haven't seen Dylan's New Nightmare yet, but every picture I've seen of him as Freddy looks absolutely phenomenal, and he is of course a voice actor, so that makes sense. Like so many people commented that this person should play Freddy is Kevin Bacon, and I guess he said that he would love to take over the role from Robert Englund, and man, I can totally see that. I like need an AI rendition or something. I'll try to make one and I'll use it as B-roll if I can find it, but if they can put the Freddy makeup on him, I think that could actually be very cool. So if he wants to do it, I think they should definitely go ahead and get him to play Freddy in this movie. But I also think they really should have a scene where Robert Englund gets to play Freddy one more time and then kind of passes the torch, right? Like he's not going to do the whole movie. There are tons and tons of interviews where he says he's not going to be in a new movie playing Freddy. Just let him play the part one more time and then pass on the role to Kevin Bacon. If you didn't see my last video, my kind of like soft pitch for it is maybe he's like old and aged and falling apart in the dream world because he's been long forgotten for like decades at this point, but somehow some way he's able to kill a kid, get back into people's memories, and that is enough to regenerate him into a new actor. I feel like that could be pretty cool if they handle it right. But yeah, if you got a different idea for a director, definitely let me know in the comments. The last thing I want to cover in this movie is this weird contract issue that they have with A Nightmare on Elm Street thanks to the remake. My friend Critical Overlord told me about this, and he said he's heard it from a few different people, but still I would say just take it with a huge grain of salt. Basically what's going on is that in the remake, Rooney Mara plays Nancy, and she had a contract that said if there were any sequels or subsequent movies in the franchise, she would have to come back for at least one or a couple more to play Nancy in the movie. And if they have to worry about that, for obvious reasons, that's going to be a difficult hurdle to kind of jump over. I think it can be done. I don't really know how. Maybe they can work it out where she can play a different character other than Nancy, or maybe when they come back to her and say, hey, we're reviving A Nightmare on Elm Street, we contractually have to ask you about it. Do you want to be in it? Maybe she'll say no because of the terrible reception to the remake where she played the main character, right? Like you got to know when people don't really want to see you on screen as that character. And I feel like this is a situation where if anyone's going to play Nancy, it's got to be Heather Langenkamp. But personally, I would love a new cast of characters where they're all having to deal with Freddy and they don't know what he is, and they have to figure it out by going into the dream world and kind of confronting him, right? Like I don't want the Lin Shaye character who's going to go, oh, I remember Freddy. He terrorized my street and killed my parents when I was a kid, because every horror movie ever does that, and I'm so sick of it. I'd rather the teens in the movie be likable characters who go out of their way to kind of figure out what's going on, and we'll know as the audience, but they won't because they'll be facing Freddy for the first time ever. So yeah, what's going on here is that it looks like New Line Cinema ended up getting the rights to A Nightmare on Elm Street. There might be a contractual issue with Rooney Mara, but regardless, I think we'll see this movie by either the end of 2024 or 2025 at the latest. You know, with horror movies, once they get the green light, they go into production super fast and they are just thrown out into theaters indiscriminately. I'm still mad about The Haunted Mansion and Cobweb getting dropped in July around Barbie and Oppenheimer and everything else that was going on in the middle of the summer. Cobweb for sure, just because every screenshot I've seen of that movie has pumpkins in it. It should have been released at the very earliest in the middle of August, like the earliest. That is an October movie, and this year all it really has to compete with is The Exorcist Believer, which is crazy that they just dumped it in the theaters right next to Barbie. But yeah, that's all I've got for you on A Nightmare on Elm Street. I said at the beginning of the video I'd talk about this more, but the reason I haven't been uploading to this channel as much as I would like to is kind of a combination of things. First of all, I moved cross country back to Michigan. My My fiance and I were planning to do that after we got married in October, but she got offered a great job here, so we kind of had to like pick up and move very fast, which took up a lot of time, obviously. And then also the wedding is happening in October, and we're doing a lot of stuff ourselves, so we can kind of save money on that. And the biggest chunk of time really goes to my video game channel, PS Ready. I upload 3 times a week there, and then I also have a Steam Deck channel called Deck Ready, and I do my best to upload twice a week there. And my voice is usually shot on the days I record for that channel, so I kind of have to work around that by shooting on weekends and stuff like that. And just with the house and everything, it's just been really tough. I really am doing my best to make time for this though, because out of all the stuff I make, this is by far my favorite. I just hope we get more franchises like A Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th and Halloween back, because when I upload videos about other horror movies, for some reason YouTube goes, I'm not going to show that to anyone. And this isn't meant to sound like complaining at all. I'm like the least stressed I've ever been. I'm definitely the happiest I've ever been here in Michigan. It's just hard to find time for everything I want to do. I have a lot of different things that I want to do on YouTube and in my real life, and you know, there's never enough time for everything you want to do. I'm doing my best here, but there will be more videos on this channel. So yeah, whether you've been here for a while or you're new here, thank you so much for the support on that last video. I really appreciate it. It really just made my whole weekend. I'm not joking at all, and I appreciate everyone who subscribed. As always, my name is Jimmy Champane, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.